All right. So we were talking about the epidermis, and I wrapped up with, I want to say, let me just go back to the previous slide here. We wrapped up with the last layer, the most superficial layer, the stratum corneum, okay? And the stratum corneum's thickness will vary depending on if we're talking about thick skin or thin skin, which leads me into this slide here. All right, we're going to start talking about some variations in the epidermis. So there's three types of variations. First, we talked about briefly was the thickness. Certain parts of the epidermis are going to, the thickness is going to be considerable, and then in other parts of the epidermis, it will be pretty mild, pretty small. Obviously, skin color will play a role. All right, that has to do with the epidermis. We talked about melanin is one of the components that can cause color changes in our skin. And then finally, skin markings. So we're going to go through all these. I want to start off with the thick versus thin because it's real easy. So what I tell folks is when you're learning where thick skin is and where thin skin is, always go with the easy one first. Okay? Thick skin. There's only two places in your body. The soles of your feet, palms of your hand. That's where your thick skin is, and that means that thin skin is everywhere else. Okay? Back of your head, on your forehead, on your back, all right, on your neck, on your chest. That's all thin skin. Okay? Thick skin is going to be your palms and your soles. Okay? So if you recall, the epidermis had up to 5 layers. Okay? And we call those strata or stratus. Okay? Stratum basale, stratum spinosum, stratum granulosum, stratum lucidum, stratum corneum. Those are the 5. Thick skin has all 5. Thin skin is missing this one here. Okay, the stratum lucidum. The stratum lucidum is only 3 to 5 cell layers thick. It's not very thick. Okay, it's not like it's missing much in thick skin. In thin skin. Okay, but just keep that in mind. The stratum lucidum is not present in thin skin here. Okay. One other thing. All right, in our thick skin here, we have sweat glands, but no hair follicles. And if we don't have hair follicles, we don't have sebaceous glands. Can't have one without the other. Okay? If you think about it, you can cheat. It's not really cheating. Just look at your palm of your hands. You have no hair there. Okay? If you have no hair, you don't have any hair on the bottom of your feet. All right? That means you have no hair follicles. That means you have no sebaceous glands. Okay? So that's another characteristic of thick skin. Well, guess what? On thin skin, everywhere else in your body, all right, you'll have sweat glands. Okay? You get sweaty palms. All right? I do sometimes. Sweaty feet, unfortunately. All right? But you also have hair follicles, and therefore, if you have hair follicles, you have sebaceous glands. Okay? All right, questions about that? That one I think is the easiest of the variations when we're talking about for the epidermis. So here you can see a slide here depicting thick skin. Look how thick or how big the stratum corneum is in thick skin. I mean, I'm not going to go and try to count all those cell layers, but I would say that's close to 50, you know. Well, maybe that's more. Maybe not 50, all right, but 30, 40, okay? And then you can see here's the stratum corneum on this slide. It's so small, all right? Not that much, okay? You can really see here on the stratum basale and even in the stratum spinosum, these darker staining cells here, all right? They're loaded with melanin, okay? You can see it way easier. I mean, it's down here too, all right? But you can't see it as easy. It doesn't stand out as much, all right? Which leads me into the next variation, which is skin color. Okay? All right. So the 3 things that are listed up here pretty much will help determine our skin color. Okay? Does anyone know what hemoglobin is? What's hemoglobin? It has to do with your blood. Okay? Hemoglobin is the protein molecule that carries, blood, which it carries oxygen. Okay, oxygen binds on to this molecule, so it can be carried in your red blood cells. All right, so when we think of hemoglobin, you have to think of the blood vessels. Okay, melanin, all right, that's that dark staining chemical that the melanocytes make, all right, and it covers your nucleus when you're exposed to ultraviolet radiation. Okay, and it gives some folks a darker skin tone. All right, it doesn't give me any kind of skin tone. I don't get tan, I get red. All right, and then carotene. Okay, carotene. You ever heard of beta carotene? Carrots. Okay, carotene, and I usually say this every semester only because I think it's just funny and it makes me laugh. So maybe it'll make you laugh. I worked at Red Lobster a long time ago, and I worked there, and there was this guy there. This is up in New York, so none of you would never know him. I can't remember his last name, so it's not like I'm betraying him. His first name was Jeff. He was like 6'4", but he had orange skin. Orange skin. Apparently, he was going and doing spray tans to a bad place because have you ever seen Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the first one with Gene Wilder? All right, the Oompa Loompas, all right, they had orange skin. I'm not lying to you. He was like, we used to call him Oompa Loompa. He was like a 6'4" Oompa Loompa. And one of the main chemical components for spray tanning is keratin. All right, it's an organic component, and it's a lot of these folks. I mean, I'm assuming that they've made a better chemical base for the spray tan, but it was safe because it was organic. And so you spray it on the person, the skin could absorb it and give it its coloring, but it was also organic, and you can metabolize it safely. So I won't get into it. All right, so hemoglobin, all right? When oxygen is bound onto it, it gives it its red color, okay? And if carbon monoxide binds onto it, it gives it an even brighter red color, okay? They describe it as a cherry red. So that's how you can tell if somebody has carbon monoxide poisoning, is that their blood is like a bright red cherry color, okay? Melanin, already talked about that. It's that dark pigment made by these guys, okay? The melanocytes will then share it with these guys, all right? And it will get shared through with all the other cells in that area there to help protect their DNA, their nuclei, okay? And so obviously it varies depending on, when we say heredity, what your parents look like, all right? Another component is how much time you get out in the sun, okay? And then there's this condition called albinism, and that's basically when the melanocytes will not produce melanin. It's a genetic condition, okay? And it's usually caused, believe it or not, through what's called dimerization. I know I mentioned this to you before, and it's when your DNA, all right, gets damaged. All right, I'm not saying it's similar, but the DNA gets damaged, and when it goes through the transcription process of making the proteins, it makes garbage, essentially, and it can't produce the melanin, okay? And then carotene, again, yellowish orange, lot in carrots, obviously. Some of the, you'll see it in certain vegetables. What's the other one? The tip of my tongue. And you'll see it in that, and you can also tell if somebody's literally eating, if they're not, what Jeff was doing with spray tanning, if you eat too many vegetables high in beta carotene, you can get that coloration to your skin. All right, so it's another indicator of, you know, what their diet is. Okay, so here you can see, all right, our melanocyte here, it's got these appendages, and it's producing the melanin, and then it'll share that melanin with all these neighboring cells in the area. It's really kind of cool, all right? And so that melanin will be then be shared with these cells, and then they'll take it and coat the nucleus to keep the DNA safe. All right. Finally, the last variation for skin is going to be the skin markings. All right. Now these are going to be some of the things that you will see on the external surface here. The more popular one here, we refer to it as a mole, but it's actually a nevus. Again, and it's just when you have several of these melanocytes clumped together, and it's when you talk about moles and whatnot, people start to think, all right, you know, cancer in latter years, and folks that are, especially if they're a lighter skin, they have to go into a dermatologist. I want to say like in their 60s, maybe even 50s nowadays, you know, and go in and get checked every year. Literally have somebody pour over your body and look at all of the moles to make sure that they haven't changed in size. All right, and normally, if they haven't changed in size, benign, no problem. But it's when, again, ultraviolet radiation, sunlight, can cause that, and it can cause it to go from this benign nevus into a malignancy. You can get melanoma, as was the more common skin cancer. We'll talk about that. But this can start to become more of a malignant instead of benign type of skin marking, and that's when it becomes a problem. Freckles, randomized yellowish brown spots throughout the skin. Again, it's just scattered sites of active melanin activity. You know, I have freckles. It's part of my DNA, my hereditary characteristics. When I go out in the sun, they get darker and they start to spread a little bit. Okay, so think of that as increased melanocyte activity. Mangiomas, we've seen these in babies. All right, a lot of times you can see them. Most of the times they'll resolve themselves. All right, and it's just a benign blood vessel tumor there. And if they persist and if they actually grow, then you can surgically remove those. Fingerprints or friction ridges. Okay, this is where, and I briefly mentioned this, I think last time we talked about the skin, is where the dermis and the epidermis, all right, where the papillary layer of the dermis, the bumps that go upwards like this, okay, and then what we call the epidermal ridges, which are the downward collection of epithelial tissue, all right, this whole area here, all right, where these two ridges come together and interlock, all right, that causes fingerprints. And so everybody's is different. You do not have identical fingerprints, all right? To anyone else in this world, and I'm almost positive that identical twins do not have identical fingerprints. Almost positive about that one. All right. All right. Let's get into the dermis. Okay. This is the second layer to the skin. All right. And it is made up of, we already know, we just learned this, connective tissue proper. Okay, the first type of connective tissue. Remember, connective tissue proper, supporting connective tissue, fluid connective tissue. We slide over to the first category. Okay, and it's made up of connective tissue proper. But in this connective tissue proper, we have all the other tissue types. All right, so we have sweat glands, which is epithelial tissue. All right, so there's that. We have, where are you? Erector pili, that's smooth muscle. All right, and sensory nerve endings, nervous tissue. So in that layer, you have all four tissue types. Okay, just something to know. I tell folks the dermis layer is the layer that has all the stuff in it. Okay, blood vessels, muscles, glands, hair follicles. All right, you'll have sensory receptors in there. All right, this area has all the stuff. So we have two layers, the papillary layer and the reticular layer. Okay, the papillary layer is the smaller one, and it's the first one. All right, it makes direct contact, all right, with the epidermis. Okay, and then the reticular layer is the second one. All right, that's the deeper. Okay, but it's the actual thicker. Okay, the bigger layer. Okay, because it contains a lot of the stuff. All right, let's talk about that. Okay, so the papillary layer, mainly made up, and you want to know this, areolar connective tissue is the main type of connective tissue in this layer. So, I know you might not remember this, you just learned it in lecture. Areolar connective tissue is loose connective tissue. And one of the characteristics of loose connective tissue is that it has few cells and it has a few protein fibers, but has a lot of ground substance. So that means it has a lot of blood vessels. Okay? So this area will have a bunch of blood vessels up in it. And when I show you a picture of it, you'll be like, oh, that's true. All right, Dr. Cosmo knows what he's talking about. All right? So these bumps that we saw, and we saw this in lab, all right, these upward bumps, those are the dermal papillae. Okay? And then, like I was talking about in the previous slide, or 2 slides ago, all right, it's the dermal papillae that interact with the epidermal ridges to make your fingerprints, but also they kind of lock each other in place, much like a zipper does. Okay, it locks it in, all right, to increase the surface area between the two. So we have that good, strong connection there. Okay? All right, so now the deeper layer of our dermis is our reticular layer. All right, and the primary type of connective tissue, again, you need to know this. I've seen test questions on this for lecture. All right, our dense, irregular connective tissue. Okay, now this is the layer, okay, or the connective tissue, I should say, that, again, it's a dense type of connective tissue, which means it's not going to have a lot of ground substance, okay? It'll have more protein fibers, okay? And it'll have more cells, well, not cells, excuse me, but it won't have as much ground substance. But remember, dense regular connective tissue, tendons and ligaments, there's virtually no ground substance. So that's pretty much hardly any blood vessels. This one is a little bit more vascularized, all right? But it won't be anywhere close to being as vascularized as areolar connective tissue, because that's a loose connective tissue. All right. So really make sure that you know this. Dense irregular connective tissue is the predominant connective tissue in the reticular layer. Okay. So let me ask you this then. If there was a test question that says, what's the predominant type of connective tissue in the dermis, and it had both areolar connective tissue listed and dense irregular connective tissue listed, what would you answer? Dense irregular, because the reticular layer is the thicker, bigger layer than the papillary layer. Okay, so go with dense irregular connective tissue, because you might see that also. Okay, I don't want to steer you wrong. Okay, so here you can see that picture. All right, we're kind of peeling off the epidermis here, and here are these bumps. All right, there's the dermal papillae. Here are the epidermal ridges coming down. Okay, and so pretty much. See how the papillary layer is just this upper, small, thin layer, then all this here is the reticular layer. I can zoom in a little bit. Okay, so you can see the papillary layer is just this top portion right up in here. And then all this down in here, not this is different, but all this in here, that's the reticular layer. You can see all the stuff that we have in the reticular. Lots of collagen in here, all right? But we have blood vessels, we've got some sensory receptors in here. Here's a hair follicle, here's one of our smooth muscles, okay? So we have a whole bunch of stuff in that lower layer. All right, so when we talk about the dermis, all right, we have a lot of collagen and elastic fibers there, but we have them arranged in parallel bundles at specific areas throughout the skin. Now again, this helps with the integrity, all right? And now this is where, if anyone's planning on becoming a surgeon, all right, this right here, this concept is hugely important for plastic surgery, all right, because when you are cutting into the skin, and you need to know this, and I'll come right back. Yeah, see this map here? Probably never seen this before, all right. This map is showing what we call the lines of cleavage, where these bundles of collagen and elastic fibers, all right, how they're oriented. And you can see it's weirdly oriented at different angles in certain areas of the body, because, let me go back and I'll let you take notes as I'm talking, all right. You need to know what those arrangements are, because if you have to do an incision into the skin, you don't want the incision to go perpendicular, all right? This line goes this way, this other line goes perpendicular to it. You don't want it going like that. If my lines of cleavage were going this way, let's say, I need to make an incision. I'm not going to make the incision this way. That's perpendicular. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make the incision, here are the lines of cleavage again, all right? I'm going to make the incision parallel. All right, because when it heals, it'll heal with less scar tissue, okay? And the less scar tissue, because what is scar tissue? It's collagen, okay? Collagen just kind of laid down in a haphazard position here. So we need to know these lines of cleavage. And basically, all right, these lines of cleavage are designated through how these bundles are oriented, because so they can resist stress, all right, during regular movements, okay? So in addition to wanting to keep as little scar tissue as possible, it also helps the incision to heal faster, okay? Because of how those bundles are oriented there. Helps to draw the incision closer together, all right? So you want to minimize your collagen, all right, formation, or that scar tissue after any type of incision, all right? And another name for stretch marks in the body are stria. And some of you may have seen them. I've had several patients that have lost a lot of weight. A good friend of mine, he used to be 440 pounds, and I think now he's like, still a lot. He's like 360 now or 380, so he lost a good amount. But he always complains about his stretch marks. I'm like, you're 48 years old, just let it go. You know, it's not, you know, I don't think you're going to be in Beachbody or anything like that. But point being is, what has happened is the collagen, those elastic fibers, they've been stretched too much, and it now has left those stria, those stretch marks going on. All right, so you can see, all right, in this picture here, we made the incision perpendicular to the lines of cleavage, and now you see that kind of gaping, all right, scar there. Here, all right, we've gone parallel, and so it's a smaller scar, all right. My daughter, she was 5? I can't remember. No, I think she was younger. 4. She got bit by a dog in the face. Yeah, and she's all right. But, I mean, this plastic surgeon came in and worked miracles on her. And so I told her, I said, it makes her look tough. But it still isn't such. She's not afraid of dogs or anything. But, and it's, when I say it's kind of her fault, we kept telling her, get your face away from the dog. I mean, when you get your face up against the dog, and if a dog growls at you, that's their warning. You know, I mean, that's them saying, get away, you know. The dog growled, and she didn't listen. And so, I mean, I felt bad. Don't get me wrong. You know, but she doesn't do that anymore. All right, let's get into the last part. I don't want to say layer, but the last part of this chapter. Because this layer, the subcutaneous layer, all right, also known as the hypodermis, all right, and we do call it the superficial fascia, but not so much. We'll revisit superficial fascia later on, all right, in the muscle chapter. But the two most common names are going to be these two, okay? Subcutaneous layer and the hypodermis, all right? This is another great test question, and in fact, I ask it. It is not part of the integuments. So it's a great true false, okay? Or if you see a multiple choice question that's talking about the layers of the skin, and subcutaneous or the hypodermis is one of the listed answer choices, better not pick it because it's not considered part of the integument, okay? But we just talk about it here because it's in close proximity, okay? So again, another great test question because I ask it, all right? The areolar and the adipose connective tissues are, it's the AA, okay, of the subcutaneous layer. That's what we see. So when you're dissecting a cadaver or in surgery, when you cut the skin and peel it back, initially right underneath, you will see predominantly the adipose. That's one of the areas that your body likes to store things, all right, is in this layer here. And so when you look at somebody, especially men, as we get older, we start to deposit our fat more around our midsection, all right? So a lot of our adipose tissue is stored in our subcutaneous layer, right, in our midsection, okay? And what was it? What was the other spot? The neck. All right, for men, I don't know why, but apparently that's what we do. Women, it's more around the hips. So your subcutaneous layer, you'll put it on more around the glute area and the hips, all right? And again, it's just genetics, that's what your body does. But you also have areolar connective tissue in there. And those are both loose connective tissue, okay? Which means there's a high vascularity supply there. Because remember, think about it. Adipose tissue is stored energy. If your body needs to mobilize that quickly, all right, or in dire needs, you've got that blood system there to help do that, all right? So again, this layer, look, protection, energy storage, and insulation, aren't those all functions of adipose connective tissue, right? Protection, cushioning, all right, insulation, and energy storage. That's all, by definition, all right, the functions of adipose tissue, okay? So because it's made up of these two types of connective tissue, all right, and we know that loose connective tissue has a high vascularity, all right, great place to stick drugs into, especially if we need to get it into the circulation. Okay, so we'll inoculate people all the time right into there. All right, and muscles. All right, when you get your booster shot. All right, for tetanus. You ever wonder why it's so sore? Because it goes right into the skeletal muscle and it irritates the skeletal muscle. Does anyone here had their vaccination for COVID? Any soreness? Any soreness? Yeah, okay. I've talked to some people that it's varied. They've had it. One person had it for like a day or two. I've talked to some that have had it for several days, so it's about on par. Okay, all right. And they do it right in the arm? Like the flu shot. Okay. All right. All right. So, someone's, oh no, arm sore for a few days. Okay, you did? Yeah. Yeah, I went and got my booster shot years ago when I first moved down here, and I let the kids watch because I wanted to show that a grown-up can handle it, you know, and it hurt, but I didn't let them know it. And I knew it was, but I hate needles. I hate needles. I can stick needles into people. I just don't like them being stuck into me. And that's why I could never be an intravenous drug user. Oh, well. All right. Protection. Let's talk about some of the functions of our skin, the integument. All right. So the first one we put up here, and I think it's pretty important. All right. Protection, because it's going to, help protect us from bad effects or harmful effects of sunlight, ultraviolet radiation. Right. But we also need that because we need it to synthesize vitamin D, which is what our skin does, which we'll talk about in lecture, but not now. Right? It is our first line of defense. When we talk about the immune system, it's called the innate immune system, which is your skin is the covering of your body. And so it's a physical barrier that keeps bugs, all right, microbes, pathogens from getting in. Okay? So it helps to keep out these harmful microbes from bothering us. If you splash certain substances on yourself, all right, onto the skin, fine. Get it in your eyes, get it in your mouth, maybe not so good. So again, it helps to protect us from certain chemicals. All right, water loss and gain. All right, it is huge in protecting us from getting dehydrated, folks. Keeps water inside. All right, that's truly important. Now, gain, different story. All right, we talked about this last class. Your skin is not water resistant. All right, it's not waterproof. It's water resistant. All right, so you will get some water in, okay, but you will keep a majority out. Like if you stay a couple hours in the pool or the tub, you know, so you get wrinkly. That's the water resistance going on, not the waterproof going on. Okay. All right. Mentioned vitamin D. We'll talk about this in later chapters. But you do need to know that the active form of vitamin D is calcitriol. All right. The precursor, which is cholecalciferol, gets synthesized in your skin. So it's really cool. So for those of you that do take vitamin D supplements, anyone here take vitamin D supplements? I recommend if you don't that you start to take them. Vitamin D is, and I hate to keep calling it vitamin D, it's a prohormone. Right? It serves. I went to a seminar years ago, and they were talking about way back then that vitamin D deficiency has proven to show increased likelihood of developing leukemia, certain types, all right, of cancers. All right. It also helps boost your immune system. All right, and especially when we'll talk about it, it helps to regulate calcium and phosphate levels in your body. All right, so it's a huge, important substance that you should be taking in regularly. I usually recommend someone take in 5,000 IUs a day. And especially nowadays when people are freaking out about colds and flus and coronavirus, you know, vitamin D, zinc, another one, magnesium. Oh, God. I have a huge crush on magnesium, all right? It's bomb. Okay, so almost done. Let's wrap up with skin, and well, we're going to talk about the nails and hair, and then we'll be done with the skin. All right. One of each chapter, for the most part, there's a couple facts in it that I just absolutely love, and they're not technically like really important facts, but they're just kind of cool things. Like this first one up here, that the nails are actually a modification of your outer epidermis layer. All right, the stratum corneum. You know, I thought the nails were something completely different. all right, that they weren't even really part of your skin a long time ago when I was growing up. And so the fact that the nail, that hard structure that sits on the ends of your toes and your fingertips, is actually just a modified version of your stratum corneum, I just think it's cool, okay? It's at the ends of the toes and the fingers, helps to protect, helps to increase your ability to grasp things, all right? And you can also use it for certain, the nails, you can use it, well, scratch it if you have an itch, but you can use it to determine certain characteristics of the cardiovascular system. All right, and I'll talk about that here in a moment. But let me go through, all right, some of the anatomical features of a nail. And I can guarantee you that probably one, maybe two test questions will be on the nails here, okay? So let's talk about this part here, okay? I'm going to show you a term, and then I'm going to show you the picture so you can know what I'm talking about, all right? So the part that you clip off when you're doing your nails, that is the free edge, right there. Okay, you can see on our drawing, here's the free edge. All right, and it's white because there's no blood vessels underneath, okay, which gives it that appearance of the whiteness there. But if it was laying over the end of the fingertip there, then it would have more of a pinkish type of appearance there. All right, so that's known as the free edge. Okay, now if we travel more proximally, more towards the knuckle, all right, now when we go over the end of the fingertip, all right, now we're over some of the capillaries there, and we refer to that as the nail body. Okay, so you can look at your own fingertip and see, all right, this is what we're referring to. All right, the nail body is going to be this whole structure here. All right, so you can see that, and underneath, all right, has a pinkish appearance. So if you have a patient or somebody that's complaining of shortness of breath, and you're either suspecting something's wrong with their lungs or cardiovascular, easy way to determine if they have pretty decent, what we call peripheral circulation, that blood is making it to the fingertips and toes. You grab their fingertip, press down on it for 10 seconds and release. And when you first take it away, it'll be white because you've squished the blood out of the capillaries. When you release it, you start counting and see how long it takes for the blood to refill. All right? If it takes longer than 5 to 10 seconds, that's a problem. It should be almost instantaneous. You can look at yourself, you see it go away, bam. All right? But if it takes, 10 seconds, I would be worried. They have some issues going on. All right? They have some circulatory problems going on. All right? So that's going to be the nail body there. Okay? All right. Now, much like, and we haven't done the hair yet. Well, we did in lab. All right? We talked about the root, all right, versus the actual hair shaft. The shaft is the hair when it's above the skin surface. The root is below. All right, same thing here, okay? The nail root is going to be, all right, what we can't see. It's below our skin, okay? And what happens is when we take all three, the free edge, the nail body, and the nail root, then we have what's called the nail plate. The actual physical nail. Like if you've ever stubbed your toe really bad and you've lost the nails. Anyone here ever lost a nail? Yeah, okay. Well, what you have? Toenail? So, did you smash it? Okay, yeah. So you lost the nail plate. The whole thing, okay, and Brianna said the same thing, yeah. So that's the whole nail plate comes off, and then you grow another one, obviously, okay? All right, so now we go deep underneath the actual nail plate, okay, where we see the nail body. We have this structure here called the nail bed. That is living, all right, epidermis, okay? So keep that in mind. It's living, it hasn't keratinized, all that stuff going on, all right? That epidermis is alive, all right? So let me zoom in here a little bit. All right. So here's the whole nail plate, okay? And then here's your nail root. You can't see that. All right? And then right below it, okay? Right below it, we have our nail bed right here. You can see it's kind of pink-like structure here, okay? That is living epidermis. Okay.
Isn't that essentially like the way when you're doing your nail?
Quick?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and the quick, you know, I don't know exactly what the definition of what the quick is. If anyone's here ever clipped quick, that well, it's painful, but they don't stop bleeding. And we had a situation with that with our Roddy. But the quick is pretty much the living tissue, and I'm not sure if that's part of, well, the nail matrix has to be in there, and that's the part of the nail, because our nail, like our hair, it starts at the end there, all right, and it pushes out, obviously. You know, your nail is pushing out, all right, from your finger there, all right, and I'm not sure. I'd be curious. I'd have to research that about the quick. If anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, the quick is, if you ever looked at a pet's nail, like the claw, in this, it's like, all right, so here's the pet's nail right here, all right, and then the quick is the living material inside. So when you cut it, you'll just go here and here and here. Well, unfortunately, I went there. Yeah, I know. And it just won't stop bleeding, you know. I mean, it's crazy.
What about the white spots right on your nail?
Oh yeah, we're gonna talk about that. Great question. Yeah, some of those are trauma, all right, if you banged it, and then some of it is deficiency in certain nutrients. I've done some research because people used to tell me for the those spots there that it was due to deficiency in vitamin C, but I haven't found any more on that. So I don't know if that's true or not, and I need concrete evidence. Okay, so when we were learning about the hair in lab last week, we talked about the hair matrix, and that's the part of the hair that the keratinocytes are constantly dividing, all right, and pushing the hair out from the root. Well, same thing here. All right, we have the nail matrix. That's the actively dividing and growing portion of the nail. It's the proximal portion of the nail and just pushes it forward. And we all know that. We don't even have to think about it because we clip our nails. We're not clipping, all right, towards the knuckle. We're clipping at the end because it gets pushed out that way. All right, the next structure, the luna. I always think of the moon, all right, like lunar, all right, but luna, all right. This area here is going to be the whitish area, and you can look on your fingernail. I'll show you the picture here. It's right here as the what some people call the cuticle, all right, right here at the base of the nail, all right, and that's the luna, okay? And it appears that way because we have a thicker amount of epithelium in that tissue, in that region, okay? And then where the skin folds over on the lateral portions of the nail on the sides, those are the nail folds. And then where your actual skin kind of comes down on top. I've never had a pedicure or a manicure done. So I've never had my cuticles or the epiconium treated. But that's basically where the epidermis from your skin comes down onto the nail wall there. Okay, you can see it. You can look on yours. It's real thin. All right, and then finally we have the hypoconium, all right, and that is going to be where the free nail edge is pretty much at the tip of your finger, all right, right underneath with a free nail edge. I'll show you on the picture. You guys can't see what I'm pointing to. So I wish I had a split screen. All right, so here you can see the epiconium or the cuticle right back here, okay, and then the hypoconium is where the free nail edge hangs over. All right, it's right up in here. Okay. And that's it for nails. All right, hair. Okay, so we talked about a little bit last week about what the hair is. All right, it is made up of keratinocytes. Okay, and basically the hair itself starts within the hair follicle and grows upwards, outwards towards the epidermis there, all right? And we have three types, okay? We have the first type is what we're born with, lanugo, okay? And I love the description of it. It's a downy, which means it's really soft, really small. You'll only see it, all right, on a fetus, okay? When it's in just before birth. Well, I shouldn't say just before. It's in the last trimester. But you should know this. The other time that you will see this, and again, I don't know why this happens, all right, is when there's a person that has anorexia nervosa for whatever reason. I don't know why their body's hair, not their hair on their head, but like the hair, like their peach fuzz and the hair on their arms and legs, it reverts to the lanugo. which is the darndest thing. I have no idea why, but that's the only time that you'll see that after someone's born. Okay, only time. All right, the next type of hair is the vellus hair. Okay, fine hair in which we see on our arms and legs. Okay, this hair, all right, is it's the most abundant type of hair. And then finally, we have our terminal hair. Okay, this is the hair that's on our heads, our eyebrows, our eyelashes, and for myself, facial hair. Okay. All right. Oh, and then of course, yeah, puberty. All right, this is the hair that grows down in the pubic region, and then also in the axilla, which is armpits. Okay. Alrighty. All right, so when we're looking at the hair, all right, we have 3 zones for the growth. Okay, the first is, and again, not that I do a lot of gardening, but I compare it to like a tulip. All right, we have the hair bulb, and that's the base. So here's our hair. And here's our hair. Okay. All right, so the hair bulb is down here at the base. Okay. And actually, I don't know why I'm doing this to you guys. Subjecting you to my horrible drawings when I have a picture I can show you. Shame on me. All right. So here we can see, all right, we have our hair bulb, this kind of swelling outward portion here at the base of our hair. All right, and then as it goes up, we have the roots. All right, that's the part that was under the skin, and then once we get past the skin, there's the hair shaft. We're all good on that? Good. Okay. Okay. All right. Back. Okay. So keep in mind, we already saw this before. All right. The root is below the skin surface, and then the shaft is going to be beyond the skin surface. All right. When we talk about the bulb, all right, that's where we're going to see the actual dividing living epithelial cells before they start to undergo the keratinization process there. Okay. Around the bulb, all right, we have this structure called the hair papilla. It's made up of connective tissue, which is going to offer support, all right, and protection, all right, to the living tissue inside. Okay. All right. So let's break it down, all right, into some of the components here. All right, when we're talking in the base of the bulb, not the base of the bulb, but in the bulb. Okay, the actively dividing region, all right, where those keratinocytes are dividing is known as the hair matrix. Okay, same thing that we saw in the nail here. All right, so similar to what we saw in the epidermis, where in the strata basale, all right, when you have a keratinocyte that divides, one stays in that layer, the other one gets pushed towards the surface. Same thing happens here. All right, one will stay, all right, and then the other one will get pushed towards the surface there. Okay, so as the cells move out of the matrix, they move into this next structure here, which is called the medulla. Okay, and this is where we start to get our keratin formation occurring. All right, so the cells are still flexible, all right, but they're starting to become slightly more rigid. Okay, because they're developing that keratin there. Okay, then as we move further towards the outer portion of the hair itself, all right, that hair structure, all right, we start to become a harder substance to give the hair a more of a rigid configuration, all right, so it's just not flopping around there. Okay, and then as we move to the outside, the absolute last layer, that's the cuticle. Let me show you. Okay, why did I do that? Okay, so you can see, all right, in this thin layer here, all right, well, let me go down here first. Okay, down in this region here is the medulla, the matrix. Okay, that's the actively growing region, and those cells will start to move up this way here. So when we move upwards, we're eventually going to call that group of cells at the center of our hair. All right, that's going to be the medulla. All right, which is that dark, I think that's brown. All right, then you can see this kind of tannish area there. Okay, so these cells are a little bit of flexibility. All right, we start to move towards the outside here, this tannish area, that's going to be the cortex. And then this, I don't know, it's a dark brown line or a black line, but this one single line on the outside, that's the cuticle. All right, that's that outer layer there, okay, when we're talking about the actual root here, okay? Okay, then we have our hair follicle, which is like the envelope around the actual hair itself. Think of the hair as the letter, the envelope in which it's mailed in, all right? That's going to be on the outside. That is going to be our connective tissue that we see on the outside, that dense irregular connective tissue, okay? Now the hair follicle is usually found in the dermis layer, but it can descend down into the subcutaneous layer, all right? So it's not always going to be just in the dermis, all right? Keep that in mind, all right? And then finally, we have the erector pili muscle, all right? That's that smooth muscle, so it's involuntary. And this is the muscle that is responsible for what we call goose flesh or goose bumps. And what causes that is, and we'll talk about this in chapter 13, sympathetic nervous system stimulation, fight or flight, okay? That same system that causes the fight or flight, like running really fast, increasing your heart rate or whatever, that's the same nervous system that will control, all right, this muscle to contract and cause goosebumps. Has anyone ever heard of it as goose flesh? I know. See, I never, but some textbooks refer to it as goose flesh, and I'm just like, that's weird. Only flesh that I know that geese have is feathers. I'm sure they have skin underneath, but. All right, so what are the functions of hair? Okay, protection, right? For someone like me, it's good because if I'm outside in the sun in the summertime, and if my hair, not like when it's like this, but normally I wear it longer, all right, it protects me from getting sunburn, okay? Obviously, facial expression is tough to really tell with masks on, but I can tell if somebody's like kind of puzzled because they might raise their eyebrows or whatever, all right? So that helps with kind of figuring out what's going on. Heat retention, all right, part of that when goosebumps occur is to help trap heat in against your skin, all right? But also, obviously, all right, if you have more hair on the top of your head, it will help hold the heat in more, okay? Same with a beard, all right? I'm telling you, when I used to have a beard and I let it go, not really long, but I would be warmer in the summertime, all right? Sensory reception, okay? You can feel the wind blowing slightly if it moves the hair on your arms and on your head and on your face. So that's another, because you have those sensory receptors that are in close proximity to the hair follicles there. Visual identification. If my hair is all gray, do you think I'm 20 years old? No. You think that I'm probably older. I have white hair or gray hair, then you're going to be like, all right, that person's a little bit older, right? And my hair is all one color, okay. You know, usually you think I'm a little bit younger. And then pheromone dispersal. All right, pheromones are this chemical that your body produces that's supposed to be like your scent or whatever, and it gets onto the hair, and then from there, if you're sweating sometimes pheromones are described to be stinky, you know, someone doesn't smell good, but part of that is because the hair actually helps to disperse some of that scent there, the pheromones. All right, you guys, wait, let me see something here. Hold on, I think I already went through these before. Nope, okay, I didn't. Just to go back to glands here in a little bit more detail, all right, when we're talking about our sweat glands. And we'll review this when we're going over the skin, all right? So just a quick, and then we're done with the hair. And I'll see if I can break into the, no, you know what I'm going to do? Because we have a test tonight for some of you. Yeah. I'll finish up with the skin. Keep an eye out for that the lab video that I'll put out this weekend, all right? All right, anyways, sweat glands, okay? We already know that there's two types of glands, exocrine and endocrine. Okay, so our sweat glands are a type of exocrine gland, which means they have a secretory portion and a conducting portion. Right? Sebaceous glands are also a type of exocrine gland. So sweat glands come in two shapes or two types. All right, the merocrine and the apricrine. One of the ways I'm gonna, before I forget, think of apricrine, think armpit. Okay. Or axilla, okay? And I'll come back and explain to you what I mean by that, all right? All right, so apricrine glands, okay? First of all, or I think it was early when we were talking about the skin, when we were talking about tissues, we learned the different types of glands. You could have a tubular gland, a compound gland, a simple compound, all that stuff. All right. So basically, an apricorn gland is we took a tube like this, and then we bundled it up like this. Okay, that's why we refer to it as a coiled tubular gland. The overall gland looks like it's a ball, but it's essentially just one long tube that we just, crushed up into a ball. Okay, so this type of gland here is going to discharge its contents, all right, into hair follicles located where? In the armpit, otherwise known as the axilla, all right? Now, watch this trend here. Around the nipples, the pubic region, and the anal region. Now, I can't speak for the anal region, all right? But the axilla, the nipples, and the pubic areas are areas that are going to be affected during puberty, okay? So when puberty occurs, these areas get affected, all right? So what the reason why I bring that up is these glands aren't active until you start to go into puberty. I guarantee you, all right? And I can speak. He's not here. I can speak about my son. He's a 13-year-old boy, all right? He's been in puberty, all right? When he was sweating as a little kid at the age of 5, he didn't stink. Now when he starts to sweat at the age of 13, he stinks, okay? Because these apricorn glands weren't active, all right? The only glands that were working or were active at the time were the merocrine glands. Those are the sweat glands that pretty much discharge mainly water. We were talking about that earlier. So these are the glands, these apricorn glands, all right, they produce their secretion, all right, through excitosis there. Okay, they're the ones in which, all right, remember the tip of the cell pinches off, all right, and remember what the cell plasma membrane is made up of? Phospholipids, some fats, proteins, and all that. So that what they're producing is going to be thicker, but mainly proteins and lipids. But guess what? Proteins and lipids, bacteria love that stuff. They love to eat it. That's not the problem. But bacteria are like us, right? If you're going to eat something, you're going to poop it out. Bacteria poop it out, all right, and that's what causes the smell, all right? And some people describe it as BO, all right? Part of that is that person's pheromones too, but part of that is because the bacteria that are living on that person's skin, all right, when those glands are active and they secrete and they put their contents into the armpits, all right, and are in the pubic area and in the anal region there, all right, the bacteria in those areas go to town, okay, and especially if they have bad bathing habits and they're not taking a shower or bath once or twice a day, all right, that bacteria gets plenty of time to metabolize that stuff, and so people can stink, all right. So these types of glands, all right, don't become active until puberty, but when they do, their secretions are going to be more viscous, thicker, all right, because of those proteins and lipids, okay? All right. Did I skip? Oh. I did skip. I don't have the slide in here for the merocrine glands. Oh, well, we'll catch it in lecture. All right. The other type of gland that was listed up there besides the merocrine were the sebaceous. And these were those Holocaust glands I was telling you about, the holocrine ones. These are the ones when the cell disintegrates, it destroys itself. And its contents become the secretion. And you need to know this. We call the contents, I'm going to tell you this right now. Did anyone have this on their test? You did get it. Did you?
I knew it, yeah. I was looking at it like practice test or whatever.
Yeah.
And I saw that one, and it's like the third question. I was like, okay, I have to look this up.
Okay.
And I didn't look at anything else on the test.
Wow.
Practice test, and I did this.
All right. Yeah. Well, sebum is the name of the secretion from these glands. So your sebaceous glands produce sebum, which is that oily secretion that coats your hair. Okay. And then we can see, all right, what its purpose. Some people that don't wash their hair as much because they might have a higher sebum amounts. But it acts as a lubricant, but it's also bactericidal. Helps to kill things. Okay. Gets on your skin, helps to kill that. All right. But it discharges its secretions directly onto the hair follicle, so it'll coat the hair follicle. So there's another test question that I've asked on a test, and I hear it all the time when a patient lays down and when they come up off of the table, I put, when you go in to see your doctor or nurse, they say jump up on the table and they have that paper there, that they change. All right, well, if I ask them to lay down on that paper and they come up, and someone will look at the paper and they're like, oh my gosh, because they'll have the oil from their face will get on there. And some people are like, oh my gosh, that's awful. I said, no, that's good. I said, if you didn't come off that table with the oil, there was no oil, then I would think that there was something wrong. I'd be worried about that, okay? So basically, again, this discharge that comes, it becomes more predominant when, again, during puberty, okay? Especially when we produce what's called androgens. Androgens are male sex hormones, but guess what? Ladies, your body converts it into estrogen, okay? But the adrenal glands do. For a second, I was going to say the kidneys. The adrenal glands and your adrenal glands will will convert your androgens into estrogen, okay? There is a condition in which some women, their adrenal glands can't do that, so they have an elevated amount of testosterone, and it's called hirsutism, and they can take on, I'm not saying they're going to be like the bearded lady or anything, but they'll have some male characteristics there. Okay, almost done. Other types of glands that we're going to see, talk about these guys, the sebaceous glands, all right? Again, they're a type of apricorn gland here, and we will see them in the ear canal, earwax, okay? Cerumen. I lived with, I lived in the Caribbean for a little while, and the island that I lived on is called the Commonwealth of Dominica, and people usually confuse it with Dominica, which is near Haiti. Is it near Haiti? I can't remember. Well, anyways, it is, okay. Anyways, he said, because there's a lot of bugs down there. They have a millipede that's like this long. I know. And it's big, but the thing can sting. And if you step on it, I mean, it feels like your foot is on fire. Anyone here ever bit by a fire ant? Yeah, imagine being bit by 10,000 fire ants. That's what it feels like from this millipede. Anyways, there was bugs and stuff down there. And he said, I'm not cleaning my ears out the whole time, because he was worried that the bugs were going to crawl into his ear. I just thought that was funny, because every time when I do this, it makes me think about this, trapping foreign material. And so he was definitely going to make sure that he was trapping any foreign material, namely the bugs. But the big part of it is also helps to lubricate, all right, the eardrum, which is what we call the tympanic membrane. The acoustic meatus is that ear canal, okay, that leads towards the eardrum. All right, mammary glands, again, another type of apricorn gland. They're a modified type, all right? But again, all right, we saw what happens. The tip of the cell breaks off, all right, and is the secretion here, all right? And so we will see those in pregnant women near the last trimester and after they have given birth to their baby. All right, that's it. I was going to do the skeleton, but you know what? It's 8:43. I thought I was going to have more time. So will you record a video for the chapter? Yes, I will. And can you hear me? Okay. Yes, I will do that this weekend. I will start the first section of the chapter 8 skeleton. All right. I was going to try to do it tonight, but it doesn't look like we're going to have the time. And I know that I've filled you guys up with a lot of information tonight. So I will have the chapter, the remaining part of chapter 5 for lecture for the tissues. There's not a lot left, okay? And then I will do well, I haven't stopped recording yet. I have a feeling once I stop recording, it's going to crash. Then I will also record the lab portion, all right? So I would recommend before the test come Monday, Tuesday, that you watch the lecture, the last part there, okay? You can. No, there's just a little bit older, but no, the one that I'm going to send out this weekend. But yeah, and if you want to, again, the review ones might be a little bit handier because they're a little bit shorter, more condensed. All right. Any questions? Anything else? Because I'm going to stop recording here, and I don't want to lose you guys at home. If you have any questions. All right. If not, have a good night.